'tis the season for Tiff to make the annual Christmas slideshow from last year's Christmas pictures and to want to murder the entire world when she tries to figure out what software exists to do this. And the answer still seems to be basically like iPhoto or Apple Photos rather. And, to quote her a few minutes ago, I can't believe it's 2025 and this is still the answer to this question.
I mean, she's not wrong.
I know, I'm sure there's 1,000 subscription BS apps that would do this as long as you sign up for a free trial for a $15 a week subscription that you'll forget to cancel. Right. I'm sure there's a lot of that.
What is this? Describe what she's making here. Slideshow, it means just it shows a bunch of photos, one after the other with music in the background?
Yeah, not necessarily always one after the other, but what iPhoto did a million years ago and what the Apple Photos app, kind of imported from iPhoto is have, kind of like a nice generator of videos of photos that would also do things like show 2 or 3 up on the screen at once and have you have you able to slightly customize it. But the problem is its default picks for how it puts things up is never quite what she wants. So she wants to be able to customize and say, all right, for this slide, look, I love that you made a 3-up layout. That's great, but can this picture be this one instead? That kind of stuff. Just customize things. And of course, that's 2 steps above the levels of customization that Apple would ever provide. Apple's we're going to do this magically for you. And this is it. This is all the control you get. And if you want something more than that, make the whole thing from scratch. See also Swift UI. Unfortunately, Apple's version of it was fine back in the iPhoto days and kind of along for the very early days of the Photos.app days. But like everything else about Apple's desktop class apps, they basically stopped being made in the post-Steve Jobs era. And that was also the iPhone era, so we don't really know cause and effect there, but the effect is they don't get made anymore. Apple doesn't really touch their apps at all anymore. So it's kind of a shame. I do miss the era of the computer is going to enable you to be this multimedia hub that's going to take all of your media from your life and deal with it and put it together and make nice things. That era is over.
And be a bicycle for the mind.
Well, it sounds like Tiff is ending it because she demands it to be on the phone.
No, she wants it to not. She wants it on the desktop.
But she said she wants the slideshow to be on the phone, though, right?
No. She just wants something that will generate a video because what the desired output is a video file that we can send to her parents, play on the TV from a USB key, all sorts of stuff like that. Just a video file. Take these photos, make a nice video with a song behind it, and a nice arrangement of the photos coming on the screen. That's basically it.
Oh, yeah. So here's my suggestion then, if that's the requirements. Use Keynote, present, play music in the background, audio hijack capture, or actually you don't even need to, just screen record with audio and manually use the arrow key to go through it and then just take the screen recording and there's your video.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. That I believe when we discussed this last year or the year before, whenever we last discussed this, I believe that was one of the recommendations then too. And I think that's probably the right move.
Because then you have total control over the layout of each thing. You have total control when the slides change. You can put in transitions because it's Keynote, if you want to crossfade between the slides or whatever, or have things animate in. And yeah, just record the whole, do it on a laptop with a smaller screen or get the screen resolution you want, just record the screen. Not efficient, but if you want a video file, that'll do it.
Yeah, because the problem is back in the day, Apple, for a long time, Apple's big desktop strategy was we're going to make these amazing, the iLife apps. We're going to make these amazing apps that are going to deal with media really well and are going to help you do things that are hard otherwise. And we're going to do it not only easily, but we're going to give you presets that have really good taste and have really nice design and layouts and text and everything. That was what Apple specialized in. And over the years, into that strategy and following that strategy, they would occasionally add new templates, add new themes, here's a new video type we can generate. Here's a new theme for, iMovie or whatever it is. And that entire attitude of this is an amazing thing to empower people to do, that entire ecosystem of that being a thing that people really needed and wanted, that entire era, I think, basically died with Steve. And I again, I don't know if that was just where the computing industry was going with mobile or what, but like that was something that Jobs really cared deeply about and was really good at, like, you know, directing the creation of products kind of in that way, and like empowering people to do that kind of thing. And I do kind of miss that era of computing. You know, now it's all about services revenue. You know, now it's like, let's build huge ecosystems where people can extract weekly subscriptions out of everybody, like kind of scamming them. And it's like, it's a very different, like, computing now, you have to constantly be like on the defensive. You have to be constantly, like, you know, looking for ways that they're trying to get you. Like, oh, they want my email address. They're gonna send me an email every day for the rest of time now, just so I can rotate this photo or whatever. Like, you have to be so defensive now because everyone is so thirsty and so optimized to extract as much as possible. It's a very different era. And yeah, you know, a lot of things are better now, but I do kind of miss some aspects of the good old days in this department.
I think the modern replacement for that is the memories thing, where the phone makes you little slideshows and just gives them to you. Here you go, I made this for you.
Right, but if you want to customize it, too bad.
Like, well, I know, but like the number of people who are hand assembling a slideshow, and, you know, hand laying out the pictures and deciding what goes where and picking the music and the timing and everything is just so incredibly small. So, you know, that's the world we live in. Go from computers as tools for people who want, you know, creative people who want tools to do something, versus a thing that literally every person on the planet has. And a tiny fraction of them are creative people who want tools, but Apple just provides, here, I made a movie for you.
But, and it wouldn't even take that much to, like, because that's, here, I made a movie for you is a great starting point. But don't let that be the only point. Like, yeah, generate a starting point for people. That'd be like, what a great use of AI these days. Like, generate me a starting point for this, but then let me edit it. Let me tweak it. Let me control it. That would be wonderful. But I don't know. I have a hard time seeing how the current, like, software ecosystem gets from here to there without it being just a ad-riddled nightmare of invasions of every possible way.
Apparently Keynote can export as a video, so maybe that is the solution. You don't need to do the screen recording. Give it a try.
All right, let's do some follow-up. With regard to Paris Butfield at Edison's locked Apple ID, Anonymous writes, it's definitely illegal here in Australia for Apple to take purchases away and stop certain functions of devices from working. The legal term here is fit for use or fit for purpose. Terms of service aren't a defense if they break the law. And then this is all related to the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, or as I like to call it, the askatp. This specific case isn't covered by an ombudsman. What a great word that I've never used. Anyway, the specific case isn't covered by an ombudsman, so it'd have to go to court if Apple didn't agree to resolve it. Disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, etc. I've been involved in several similar battles, though. The askatp is why we have 3-year warranties on Apple computers and iPads in Australia. They do good work. Here in the U.S., we used to have the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And I'm kind of stealing John's thunder from the show notes here, but John pointed out that I have just said we had the CFPB because MAGA. I mean, I'm sorry, because we don't have a functioning government anymore. Quoting from Wikipedia, at the outset of his second presidential term, the jackass at the helm appointed an acting director of the CFPB. That's what it says on Wikipedia. Isn't that funny? Of the CFPB, who immediately ordered the CFPB to stop regulatory activity and sought to fire 90% of the agency staff. Cool. Well done, everyone. Just great work. Love it.
I do, you know, one area of this I think is interesting is, like, I mean, if we ignore the sad parts about our terrible non-functioning government that is seemingly against everything that makes common sense for regular people.
Well, it's cool for us because we're white dudes, but everyone else is screwed.
No, we're screwed too because we're not in their club. Like, it's just, you know, we're just screwed less than everyone else, but we're still screwed. Believe me.
Right.
But one angle of this, if I can step back from the politics and just kind of look at, like, the interesting maybe legal question is, like, so this was in the context of, you know, with Apple suspending accounts for suspected fraud or abuse, that they also seem to lose access to any purchases they've made. I think there could be a case to be made here legally. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking out of my butt. But I think there could be a case to be made legally that, like, the term buy being used in the interface when you purchase a license to maybe sometimes see a movie that you might maybe be able to do in the future for some undetermined amount of time, and it can be taken away at every moment. I think the term buy is misleading. And I think maybe a case could be made that you could maybe sue a company that told you were buying a movie and then could take it away from you at any time in the future for unrelated reasons. Like that, to me, that's a pretty straightforward fraud or mislead, or
false advertising.
False advertising. Yeah, I mean, like it seems like, because again, the term buy means something, and when you tell customers you can buy this movie or buy this book, that means something in people's minds. And I don't think anybody, if you ask people on like regular people in the world, if you ask them, did they understand that to mean buy a license to read this book or buy a license to see this movie in these limited forms that can be revoked at any time if you renew a weird gift card in the future? Like that, I don't think anybody would ever interpret it to mean that, any common people. And, we already have lots of precedent, I believe, that suggests that like you can't just bury something in a giant wall of terms and agreements and expect that to be super binding if it's like not common. So I think that this could be an interesting thing. Like, I don't think anyone's ever really going to, have the clout or power behind this to try to litigate it. But that is an interesting question, I think, for all of these, storefronts that use the term buy for media that does not behave the way that non-digital purchases behave with those exact same terms, often for the exact same content.
I'm going to guess that there have been multiple cases litigating exactly this, and that the big companies won, and that they all happened in the 90s. That's just a guess, though. All
right, let's talk about message threads. John, can you set a little context here for me, please?
This is about my message threads, group conversation, multiple people in the Apple Messages app, splitting into, for me, just 2 different conversations with the same people and trying to figure out if there was a way to get them to go back together. And someone had written in with a follow-up last week about, they said, so your conversation split into 2. I've got 21 copies of my 3-person conversation, 21 different copies of my 3-person conversation. And I was trying to do the math that like, even if you assume that it splinters every time someone accidentally sends to like, an Apple ID and a phone number and a phone number, Apple ID, like there aren't enough combinations that it would be 21. And I messed up the math at the time. So just to clarify, many people wrote in to give the actual math. And that is, if each person in a 3-person group chat has 2 ways to be contacted, either a phone number or an Apple ID, then there are just 8 possible combinations of all 3 participants. Order doesn't matter in this case. If order matters, I guess it's a higher number and maybe whatever. But anyway, not 21.
Good deal. And then tell me about splitting and merging and so on with regard to all this.
Yeah, as I said last episode, the idea that you're going to discipline everybody in all parts of all these group conversations to very carefully make sure that their settings on who they send from, like, do you initiate conversations from your Apple ID or your phone number? And you'll make sure all of their contacts are exactly right, and you'll make sure that they're reachable. The reachability is like, that's never going to work. Like, you're never going to be able to get everyone's settings all in sync. And that's still just based on the assumption that the problem is that, someone's doing from Apple ID and then doing from phone number and, whatever. I'm not even sure that's true based on the evidence of people saying I've got 21 copies of the conversation. Again, that's my point of trying to do that math. But anyway, that's never going to work. But one other piece of advice, aside from delete everything, log out of your Apple ID, resync, blah, blah. One other piece of advice that lots of people gave was things that had worked for them was they started messing with the metadata for the message threads. So message threads you can have a name for the group conversation. You can have a background image. I think you can have an icon for it, like that metadata. I said by changing that metadata, very often they said erase all the metadata. Some people said make sure the metadata matches in the 2 conversations, or if it already matches, make it unmatch and rematch. And that's mostly a non-destructive thing, although I can tell you that your daughter might get annoyed that you're changing her clever group name on something or other. I did that, and it didn't seem to do anything. But then the next day, the message threads were remerged. So I don't know. Is that what did it? Would they have remerged on their own? It's a mystery. But I'm going to suggest that as The only thing that I found that might work, mess with the metadata, change the icon and the name and so on and so forth. Even if they're already the same, change them to be different, then change them back to be the same, and then I guess go to sleep and cross your fingers.
Excellent.
Cool.
All right. We got a fair bit of feedback with regard to my lamenting about TV stuff that was in overtime, wasn't it? And the probably most succinct view of everything came from Colin. I'm going to read a little, it's kind of a lot, but I think it's all fascinating and pertinent. Colin writes, TV Everywhere very much still exists and is supported in channels, the software that I like, with the exception of NBC-owned networks. Those are DRM'd and channels won't touch that. There are channels extensions to get around it by capturing a Chrome window, but that's too much work. But for all the ESPN stuff, which I would care about for college football and some NFL, as of now works great. This is the primary way I consume college football using a cable login. I do fear that NBC's DRM is a canary in the coal mine, and the other networks will follow suit sooner or later. I couldn't agree more with Colin about this. So TV Everywhere, with Fios, you get a TV Everywhere login or whatever, and what that's supposed to let you do is stream basically everything you get on cable through the internet.
So you can watch TV anywhere.
Right, exactly. And everywhere even, not just anywhere, but everywhere. But anyways, we'll talk a little bit more about how that's not really the reality of the situation, but that's the theory. But as Colin points out, it was like 6 months or a year ago, I think, that NBC pulled their stuff from TV Everywhere. And first of all, we watch a lot of I shouldn't say a lot, but we watch some truly filthy, terrible television on Bravo, which is an NBC channel. And secondly, I couldn't agree more with Colin that since NBC has pulled their stuff, I bet you it's not long before like Disney does. So that's ABC and ESPN and whatnot. And who knows what else happens after. Continuing with Colin's feedback, cloud TV providers are all fine. If you're interested in local sports, you need to be a little judicious in your choice because a lot of them don't carry the various regional sports networks. For example, only YouTube TV carries NBC Sports Philadelphia. They're great for national networks like ESPN. I suspect that their cloud DVRs are doing some jiggery-pokery behind the scenes and not necessarily representing a one-to-one recording. And the recordings are super ethereal. Is that how you pronounce that?
Ethereal?
Ethereal. Thank you.
I could be wrong also. I've also never pronounced it.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever said that one out loud. Anyways, for example, when YouTube TV had its carriage dispute with ABC, everyone also lost access to their recordings from ABC networks. What were you saying, Marco, about a license? Most of them also support TV Everywhere logins. IPTV, Casey is correct in his assumption that these are all sorts of shady. They're mostly illicit streams, but they do exist and they work with channels. The magic is based on two standards, N3U8 for playlists and video feeds and XML TV for the program guide data. Any service that offers these can be added as a source in channels. This Git repo, which we'll link in the show notes, has a bunch of channels in N3U8 and XML TV format for easily plugging into channels, or just open it in VLC or IINA to flip through the list, but I can't speak to the reliability of those channels. Other shady options. Stream East is apparently the big service for sports streams. If I'm completely forthcoming, the whole reason I want to figure all this out is because I'm tired of trying to use Stream East from time to time to watch giant New York Giants games that I cannot see where I am currently located. Colin continues. OTA. I think OTA over the air is less valuable in the age where everything is available via streaming, but it works with channels and you can get some sports. All the NFL games are broadcast over the air, and 506sports.com shows you what games are in what markets week to week. As an aside, 506 Sports is incredible. I've been using it for years. It's great. College football puts the big matchups over the air. I've had an antenna for years, and I find that its utility diminishes year to year, except for NFL games. My first cut at channels was with an over-the-air antenna, and that did work great, but the current setup is so much better. Sports streaming is finally becoming a thing. ESPN now has a streaming package called ESPN Unlimited. 26 of the 30 MLB teams now often offer an in-market streaming package in addition to the MLB TV out-of-market streaming package. Peacock has a variety of streaming options if you need the NBC sports networks. None of these work the channels in any way. The Super Bowl streams in 4K on Tubi, but the broadcast itself is produced in 1080p HDR. Receiving anything, actually that's not accurate, blah, blah, blah. 4K via cable provider is not worth anything, asserts Colin. I don't think I agree with him, but that's neither here nor there. So, what is my situation, just for perspective? So I have the HD home run with the cable card plugged in, as we discussed in overtime, and according to channels, I get 321 different channels from Fios via the cable card via the HD home run. However, via TV Everywhere, I get 133, which means I am missing, air quotes, missing 188 channels through TV Everywhere. So I would rather continue to use my cable card if at all possible. Please and thank you. But very quickly, I did a quick survey of the channels I have, and it's exactly what I expected and what Colin asserted. I do get via TV everywhere, ABC, Fox, CBS, ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN News, SEC Network, ACC Network, Fox Sports 1, 2, and the Big Ten networks. I do not, however, get NBC or Bravo, etc. John, in particular, any thoughts on this?
Just wondering if your channel counts include like all the standard def channels and everything. Like, is that included in the HD home run?
Oh, in TV everywhere? I'm not sure. But yes, you are right. That is a very good point I didn't think about. So what John is saying is with Fios, you get a standard def like ABC and you get a HD or high def ABC. And so you're right. I did not consider that is a fair bit of duplication that I believe is in that 321 count that I quoted earlier. That's a really good point. All right, let's talk about custom pronunciations in iOS. Anonymous writes in, with regard to pronunciations, have you tried the accessibility settings for pronunciation? You can get to it through accessibility, voiceover, speech, and then pronunciations. That'll be in the show notes. There's also an Apple support document about it. Also in the show notes, accessibility, read and speak, pronunciations. And there's a second knowledge base article about this. And then finally, there's actually a video guide on Apple's YouTube channel, which is only like 2.5 minutes and was really well done. Actually, I don't know if either of you spent the time to watch it, but it's really, really good. So you can check that out if you'd like.
I went to that screen on my phone, and what did I see there? I saw a pronunciation of my last name and one of my friend's last names. So obviously we've discussed this on past episodes, and I just forgot about it. The thing about this is like how the voice, when you do like text to speech, this is how the voice will pronounce things. So if you have a bunch of text that includes your last name, I presumably Apple's accessibility thing that says, please read this text to me, will use the pronunciations you put in this thing. I don't know if it influences what Siri says, and everything is so messed up in Apple's world. I'm not sure if they're separate systems or they're combined or whatever, but I mean, they can't possibly be combined because my name is in that pronunciation screen from however many years ago I put it in there. But the phone wasn't saying my name right until I recorrected it as per an earlier episode when we talked about this. So anyway, it's worth doing if you ever have your phone read you things and you're annoyed by it mispronouncing stuff.
All right. Reading from Mac Rumors is wildly unrelated. Reading from Mac Rumors, macOS Tahoe introduced a bug that causes a studio display connected to a Mac to flicker every so often, and subsequent updates only seem to have made the issue worse. Mac users with the studio display have been complaining about intermittent flickering since the update launched in September. There are also complaints from users who have other kinds of displays, so it might be a bug that is affecting more than just one type of external monitor. We've experienced this issue with a MacBook Pro running on macOS Tahoe and connected to a studio display, and the Mac OS X 26.1 and .2 updates haven't improved the situation at all. In fact, the flickering seems to be getting worse in recent days. I have a studio display. I have never seen this, thankfully.
Well, you're lucky, because I've seen this story in many different places, and it's just to let people know that this is a potential issue. Again, most of them seem to say with the studio display. I would assume most of them are with laptops in the studio display, because let's be honest, most people have laptops, but it's hard to pin down. But related to this, I just want to give an update and say I still haven't updated my main machine to Tahoe because I just don't feel any motivation to do so. And I see stories like this and I say, yeah, maybe I should wait a little bit longer. I don't know. At this rate, maybe I'm just never going to run Mac OS 26 and I'll just wait for 27 or something. But who knows? I'm still running the old version of Xcode so I can get my icons to work right. So maybe I'm just frozen in time until Apple releases good versions of software that I care about.
Oh, sick burn.
I mean, honestly, I might be right there with you with the Mac OS 26. Like iOS, I'm there already. I kind of have to be. It's fine. But on the Mac, so I still have it on like my laptop, but not my desktop laptop, and I still run into like weird issues with it, and I just don't like it at all. And I'm still using whatever Sequoia, whatever I'm on my Mac. Mm-hmm. I'm not missing out on anything. Like there's I've run into nothing so far that requires me to use Tahoe on my Mac. Like so I'm kind of fine not using it. And on my laptop that does run Tahoe, the other day remember a long time ago on this show, I mentioned that I had a weird bug with the Apple Calendar app on the Mac, that occasionally the calendar app would be unresponsive. I would force quit it. Its window would stick around.
Oh yeah.
And nothing I did would close that window until a reboot. I could move it off screen. Nothing on it was interactive, but it's a window that showed my calendar content from whatever before the crash. And if I launched calendar again, it would launch a new window separate from that one. So it just kind of had this like abandoned, unclosable, uninteractable window that I would just like move into the corner of the screen until I rebooted next. Well, that still happens on Tahoe. I can confirm that happened on my Tahoe laptop the other day. I still haven't rebooted. It's still there in the corner. And so that calendar bug has not been fixed. So it's still not quite a reason for me to upgrade to Tahoe that I have found yet.
All right. With regard to malicious content delivery in Apple Podcasts, Ricky Haas writes in, starting on December 8th, my podcast app on both Mac and iPhone running Sequoia and iOS 18 has been opening Race Day Nation randomly for the last month or so. This is not a podcast that I've listened to or have interacted with in any way. Today, my phone was sitting locked on the table when the lock screen PIN came up. I picked up the phone and Face ID unlocked it, and lo and behold, the Race Day Nation podcast was opened up. The latest episode of ATP was sitting in the playback bar, paused where I'd stopped listening earlier. I reached out to Apple support and got an escalation. The guy basically was like, we've never heard of this happening for anyone. Please update to iOS 26 before we can do any further escalation. If it happens again, get the timestamp. We'll collect the logs from that time so we can know what was happening. He was uninterested in the story that's been going around from 404 Media about Apple Podcasts randomly opening podcasts by itself, or in collecting logs from the occurrence that I had already logged the timestamp for. Anyways, in my screenshot, which we are not going to publish, but I will describe for you, you may note the back button to Firefox Focus. I was watching a YouTube video and had paused it before the screen timed out and the phone locked. No wacky websites to deep link into the podcast app unless Google is selling ad space that runs while the phone is locked and auto-clicks podcast links. And then again, later on December 8th, quick update. Ever since clicking suggest less on the Race Day Nation podcast, the podcast that the app opens up to has changed to Vaporware News Network. It seemed unlikely to me that it was someone trying to hack my devices through the podcast app. But after this change in behavior, it seems like it's just something with the recommendation system has gone awry.
Yeah, that's good evidence there. It's like, look, first of all, you're not touching the phone. It's locked on the table. And then it prompts you, hey, unlock me. And you unlock it and it's like, look, how about this podcast? That's super weird, but who knows what it could be? Like the theory that like, well, you had it paused on YouTube or whatever, like you're playing a video, like it may be something in your browser, open to link or something. But then in the Apple Podcast app saying, please like suggest this podcast less. And then the next time it happens, it shows a different podcast, really lends some strong evidence that is the Apple Podcast app itself that is choosing to open random podcasts. Why is it doing that? Especially why is it doing it when your phone is locked? I have no idea, but it seems like it's not, you were on a malicious web page and the malicious web page triggered the opening of a URL that had the Apple Podcast / whatever the scheme is for that URL structure. Still a really weird story and still a really weird thing that might happen, but I guess maybe there's some code in the Apple Podcast app that essentially does like open URL on a suggested podcast at inopportune times, and then your phone prompts you to say, hey, we just opened a podcast. Even though you're already listening to a podcast, what about this one? Very weird. But anyway, this is the only thing we've heard about this, so I don't think this is particularly widespread, but it is strange.
I mean, podcast apps are hard. I can't blame, obviously doesn't seem like it's something malicious. It does seem like just like a weird bug, but look, apps, like modern apps these days on iOS especially, are just super complicated. There's a million different things that could, cause an app to open up to a content page within that app at a weird time. It could be something as simple as like, what if like an embed on a web page on something, triggers it to open up, in a weird background mode. That could be some weird case. What if it's a NS user activity continuation using continuity? If it's like, oh, you happen to have a page open on your desktop and it triggered this thing to try to open on your phone, or like there's so many paths now that something can trigger something else to try to open up in the app. And I can definitely see the possibility of one of those things going a little bit wrong in some kind of bug condition. So yeah, this seems very plausible. It's a very, very complex ecosystem that all these apps are working in now. So I'm sure it's just some weird bug, and hopefully it'll be fixed soon. In the meantime, if you want a different podcast app that has different bugs, I can strongly recommend switching to Overcast. I have my own bugs that people keep telling me about, but I don't have that one. So give me a shot.
Hooray.
It seems, I guess there is like some kind of recommendation engine in Apple Podcasts because this person said they did the, please suggest this thing less. So it's not as if like that was the original theory, like, oh, something is telling the Apple Podcast app to open a particular podcast. But it seems like what's happening is it's telling the Apple Podcast app, open a podcast that you recommend for me. And so even, but you can change which one it will recommend by saying within the Apple Podcast app, I don't like this podcast, suggest it less. It's like, okay, the next time something randomly tells me that I should pop up a podcast that you might like, I'll pop up a different one, but I'll still pop it up. And then the 404 Media story, remember, was about podcasts that had like really long, weird names and strange URLs and stuff. And I don't know. Maybe these are two entirely separate bugs, but yeah, it's a complicated world. And that's why it's so difficult to. It's one of the other things that it becomes more difficult to do these days is as the tech support for various people in our lives, they will ask you questions about why a thing happened, and they're never satisfied with the answer. I don't know. Because it's like, well, is there a way to know? Probably not. But it's a thing that we will probably never know unless we have all the source code and doggedly pursue this with a team of people for the next 5 years. But that's not going to happen. So the answer is, I don't know.
We are sponsored this episode by Zapier. Zapier is how you actually deliver on your AI strategy, not just talk about it. I mean, look, AI is everywhere these days. I personally use AI all the time for lots of things, but there is so much of my work that I don't use AI for yet because there's no way to make those things work together, or there's no tools, no connections. Zapier specializes in this. So I'm really excited to actually start trying to use Zapier to help connect my tools that don't currently speak AI natively. Zapier has this AI orchestration platform that helps you bring the power of AI to any workflow so you can do more of what matters. You can connect top AI models like ChatGPT and Claude to the tools that you and your team already use. So you can add AI exactly where you need it, whether that can be things like AI-powered workflows, autonomous agents, customer chatbots, or whatever else you can dream up. You can orchestrate it all with Zapier. And you don't have to be a tech expert to use Zapier. Anyone can use it, whether you're nerds like us or the other people in your company who aren't nerds, they can use it too. Teams have already automated over 300 million AI tasks using Zapier. They've been around since before the AI was a big thing, so they have all like the piping and everything. They have all that down pat. We've been hearing about them for years from like real like workflow power users, and they just make things easier and easier all the time. And as AI has come around, they've really embraced it and leaned way into it, and they do a really good job with it. So join the millions of businesses transforming how they work with Zapier and AI. Get started for free by visiting zapier.com/ATP. That's zapier.com/ATP. Thanks to Zapier for sponsoring our show.
There's been a lot of rumors and discussion over the last couple of months about Apple's future iPhone plans. And we're going to start with a post from Mark Gurman dated mid-November. Mark writes, Apple plans to unveil 3 new high-end models, the iPhone 18 Pro, iPhone 18 Pro Max, and a new foldable in fall 2026. Then, roughly 6 months later, it will roll out the iPhone 18, iPhone 18e, and potentially a refreshed iPhone Air. I expect this pattern to continue for years to come, with Apple launching between 5 and 6 new models annually. The information reported that a second-generation iPhone Air had been postponed from next fall into 2027 in order to add a second rear camera, and that a vapor chamber and beefier battery are in the cards. The news outlet also cited poor sales as a cause for the schedule change. But from what I've heard, the second-generation iPhone Air hadn't actually been earmarked for next year, at least not in recent months. So this wasn't a delay due to the phone's sales performance. The fact that Apple named the device the iPhone Air rather than the iPhone 17 Air signaled that it didn't want to tie the product to an annual release schedule. I'm told the main focus of the second Air will be to move to the 2nm chip rather than major structural changes. The chip upgrade should help improve the Air's battery life, the biggest drawback of the first model. Apple developed the Air, believing it would make up 6 to 8% of new iPhone sales, I'm told. That roughly matches the performance of the iPhone 16 Plus model it replaced. As for the new schedule, Apple aims to have a steadier revenue throughout the year, reduce strain on employees and manufacturing partners, and prevent its premium and budget models from cannibalizing each other's marketing. It also gives the company multiple chances each year to counter new releases from competitors like Samsung Electronics, which has long spread out its Galaxy and foldable launches.
Yeah, setting aside for a moment the iPad Air stuff, which has been much debated since then, going back and forth about the iPhone Air is not selling. Actually, it's sold out in China. Actually, they didn't make too much of it. They're not going to do it next year. They are going to do it back and forth, 2 cameras, 1 camera. That's a separate drama. I think the main big meaty chunk of this story is the idea that Apple is going to go from September being iPhone time, where they roll out a bunch of phones, and maybe like the SE or some other straggler or the E model in modern days will be later, to a cleanly split structure, which is they roll out the Pro phones and only the Pro phones in September, and then they wait 6 whole months, and then they roll out the non-Pro versions of those same phones, the plain iPhone 18 and the iPhone 18e and maybe the Air. I don't know why Air wouldn't be lumped with the Pro ones, but I guess it doesn't have Pro in the name. Oh, and the foldable, whatever that's going to be called, Ultra or whatever. Well, I'm sure we'll talk about the foldable as that date approaches. There are many, many foldable rumors solidifying now, but because that's going to be so darn expensive, I guess that goes with the Pro phones. But what do you think about that structure of having, every 6 months a new crop of phones, but not having all the new, iPhone 18s or whatever come out at the same time?
I don't love it, but I get it. I do like that we are currently programmed that in September, we will see the suite of phones that 99% of us care about. And yeah, there's always the springtime phone that's a little bit of a one-off. But generally speaking, the vast majority of us care about whatever's being released in September. And I don't love that there will presumably soon come a time that, okay, well, the Pro phones were just updated in September and they look great, but what if I don't really need a Pro phone, but I'm not sure if the regular phone has, a vapor chamber, and I really, really, really want a vapor chamber. Now I got to wait 6 months to figure that out. And that I don't really love, but certainly from Apple's perspective, it makes a ton of sense to stagger this out and not have it all hit at the exact same moment.
I think it's interesting. I mean, I think the way that things have always been done so far with Apple, where almost every phone is released in September, that only sounds sensible to us because that's how it's always been done. But that's only how it's always been done because for a long time there was just one iPhone every year. and it wasn't, once they started, and then it was okay, well, now we're going to have the one main one, and then this one that's very similar to it, but a little bit, last year's model or whatever. And then it's only been fairly recently that they've really broadened out the lineup and had a bunch of different models. That's only really been in the last 5 to 10 years of a nearly 20-year-old product line. So I think it makes sense to spread things out. How they spread it out, that's up to them. I'm sure they're going to experiment with it and see how it's felt. But I think it is interesting that you look at any of their other product lines. The iPhone is the only one that works this way, where everything is all dropped at the same time every year and, very reliably on that timeline as well.
Well, the watch too, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, I guess the Apple Watch. Yeah, you're right.
Which was a similar deal. There used to be one thing called Apple Watch, and they slowly diversified it.
That is true, but I think the Apple Watch lineup is so barely diversified at this point, and it's so kind of half-assedly updated most of the time that I'm not sure I'd draw the same parallel. But in many ways, it's kind of what I can see the iPhone getting to is more like what the iPad has or the Mac, where the Mac, you'll have the 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros will be released together, but that's a different release often than the MacBook Air. And those are both very important product lines that each get their time to shine. Because they're often released 6 months apart from each other or whatever. I can totally see that being the case here, where the iPhone Air and the iPhone Pro. We can speculate, and we have, and we will, about why the iPhone Air seems to not be a hit. And honestly, based on this growing report that says that the die shrink of the chip will, or the process shrink of the chip will solve its biggest problem of battery life, I don't think it will solve it enough, and B, don't think that's its biggest problem. But we'll go back to that some other time. But I think one of the big challenges with the iPhone Air is that it was released alongside a really good iPhone Pro update. And I think a lot of people who maybe would have had a better chance of going for the Air instead went for the Pro because it had a really good set of new colors, a really good new camera system, really great new battery life. Like, if this was kind of a weaker update for the Pro, like a more kind of routine one, or if this was 6 months later and the Pro wasn't just updated, I think the iPhone Air would actually have sold significantly better. And maybe, we talk in the Apple analyst and related space, we talk a lot about like that fourth slot in the lineup just never sells. The one that's like the consumer line, but the high end of the consumer line. It used to be the Plus, and now was it the Plus? I forget all the.
Yeah, they just said there used to be the Plus phones. It was like the Max, but with the non-Max internals, Max size but non-Max internals.
Yeah, sorry, I was getting confused because the biggest Pro used to be called the Plus. But anyway, so that slot, that kind of like last slot in the lineup, that has been doing poorly so far. But possibly it's just because there isn't space to market it. Possibly it's because it doesn't have a chance because everyone who's shopping for phones in the fall is going for the Pros. But that could still be a great slot in the lineup. I think the Air shows that, even though I would make different trade-offs if I was in charge of the universe. I would make different trade-offs for that product than Apple did. But there is a slot there. But as long as it's always released alongside the Pros in the fall, that slot will only get attention if and when the Pros are really underwhelming. And that's usually not the case. The Pros are usually really good. In some form or another, they're usually really good. So I can see this making a lot of sense. And people who are not in the iPhone hype cycle year round, whatever has been most recently launched, they might be most aware of that. So if they release the Pro in the fall and it gets all marketed out, and I mean, yes, Apple markets the iPhone all year round, pretty much everywhere. There's billboards, for God's sake. But like the Pro right now, the Pro has been the whole fall thing. There's been orange Pros all over billboards everywhere. There have been ads for the iPhone Air nowhere. Like, and John Gruber's been talking about this too since the fall, since it launched. Like, Apple doesn't really seem to be advertising the iPhone Air at all anywhere. It's all about the Pro. You see the orange Pro ads everywhere. Maybe if they spread it out, they can start splitting up that marketing more and giving each phone its time. Like when the Pro is kind of, by April, everyone knows what that year's iPhone Pro looks like. Everyone knows that year's iPhone Pro's new specs. They might not all buy them immediately. People buy their phones when they need to buy a phone, but like everyone knows what the iPhone Pro is by April of that year, So Apple does these spring events where they like drop in, here's some new watch band colors and some new case colors for our gummy iPhone cases, and now here's a new iPhone model. Like that, I can see that making sense. So I think there's lots of reasons to do this from marketing angle alone. Not to mention the fact that everything else, the supply chain, the development times, there's so many other reasons, financial spread, like there's so many other reasons to do it. But from the marketing side alone, I think it's a very sound idea, and that's why all of their other products work that way, and it's fine.
I don't know if Apple is the one who instigated this tradition, or if it's just kind of like a thing that we all converged on. But September is kind of the time when most of the fanciest new phones come out. Like, I guess the iPhone is the biggest one in that area, and I know they're spread over the year kind of, but it seems to me that a lot of sort of flagship phones are announced around that time, and it makes sense to keep the Pros there because like they're the flagship phones. They're the biggest, most expensive, most powerful. The foldable phone goes there, yada, yada. Although I always did think it was weird that they choose like September, which is essentially too late to like buy phones for kids going off to school. It's too late. I mean, not that school systems buy phones for people, but maybe someday they will. But anyway, it's like it's after the beginning of school, which is weird. I would love to see some history on like how we ended up on this particular time. But anyway, taking out the non-Pro phones from that event and putting them elsewhere I get the idea of like clearing it for marketing, but here's the thing. The Pro and the non-Pro phones, the way Apple has made them so far, have been sort of a family of products. And I know they have the A something and then the A something Pro, but those chips tend to be related to each other. They're usually made on the same process, or they have the same cores or whatever. Like it doesn't always happen. They used to be like last year's chip and stuff like that. But either way, like in recent history, they've been named the same. For example, the iPhone 17 Pro and the iPhone 17. And if you look at the chips that are in them and the features that they have, there's some kind of family resemblance. They make some kind of a family. And I say that because if you wait 6 months to roll out the non-Pro versions of the Pro phones you just came out with, especially if you don't change the naming scheme. So the Pro phones come out and you're like, iPhone 18 Pro, wow, look at this. And there's billboards everywhere and everybody loves it. It's your flagship phone and there's a foldable one, the Ultra, whatever. Woo, everyone loves it. Then 6 months later, they do a second marketing push for the non-Pro phones that are also called iPhone 18. And people say, that's not the new phone. I saw that phone in the fall, the iPhone 18 in the fall. Saying, oh, no, that was the iPhone 18 Pro. This is the iPhone 18, but not Pro. And they're like, what? No, it's the same number. iPhone 8, they're both iPhone 18s. It's just like the expensive one and the cheap one. Why are they advertising it 6 months from now? I think that could lead to some confusion because it's like, it's not like they're withholding it, but it almost seems like that was the iPhone 18 Pro was state of the art in September. Now you're telling me the iPhone 18 is state of the art 6 months later? It looks like there's a family resemblance. There's the product name that matches up. Now it maybe won't make a difference because you could argue the people who buy the non-Pro phones don't know or care about any of this. And as you said, they just buy a new phone when they need to get a new phone. The only chance they have of delaying is if they know some tech nerd who says, oh no, don't buy now because in 1 month the new non-Pro phones are coming out, but otherwise they just buy whatever's there.
Do you know anybody who still does that? And like regular people that I interact with or that I hear from, it's always just like, oh yeah, my phone broke. I went to the store and got a new one. Like that's like there's no consultation whatsoever.
But the thing is, even the non-Pro iPhones are pretty expensive in the grand scheme of things.
Oh yeah,
it is kind of high-end-ish buyers. I don't know. Like I'm not totally against it. I just think, well, maybe what might actually help is something that people wondered briefly whether Apple would do or not, which is rename the phones to have year numbers too. iPhone 26. You know what I mean? Because then if it comes out later in the year, you're like, oh, this is the current phone. 26, right? Or, as long as it's like car model years, like it's 2025 and the 26 phones are the current ones. And then when you have the Pro one come out and the 6 months later, the non-Pro, they both have the year number in them. So they seem like it's like when a car model year, like, oh, the 2026, Honda Civics aren't coming out until 6 months into the year. No one cares because it's still the 2026 model. I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's that big of a deal. I do think spreading the manufacturing has got to help because how painful must it be to like ramp up on every single one of these models of phones all at the same time at the huge numbers that Apple makes them in. So that probably helps there. But on the other hand, I wonder how maybe this is some kind of financial maneuvering of like that big bump you would get from like phone time is now going to be spread into two smaller bumps, but maybe that second bump is going to help with some quarter that's traditionally weak for them or something. I don't know. I can't even imagine what the, maneuverings are there. Anyway, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to be spread out like this, but I think there are some potential downsides. And for me as a tech nerd person, I'm going to be slightly annoyed in that it's another well, I guess I'm not going to be hopefully not going to be buying new phones for my kids much longer. I mean, hopefully I bought them both their last phone that I'm ever going to buy them, but
Oh, that's not a happy thought,
I'm
John.
told kids these days sometimes don't end up, going out on their own as soon as you might think they do. It's like, look, I just got them both iPhone 17s, plain iPhone 17s. And for my daughter, I think that should last her 4 years of college because she used an iPhone 12 for 4 years of high school. So thumbs up, success. And for my son, this is his, graduating college, off into the world. You've got a fancy iPhone 17 and use that for 4 years. And hopefully 4 years from now, you'll be able to buy yourself your own phone. We'll see how that turns out. But it does mean that new phone time requires a little bit more caution and a little bit more thought about timings. And, anyway, I don't know. I think it will probably be fine. If this gives Apple leeway to as Marco was saying, maybe give the more diversified phones some more breathing room to sort of sink or swim on their own, that'll be great because I've always been a proponent of diversifying the line, and I don't like the idea of especially if they plan for it. That's why after the iPhone launched this year, we had some rumor or something about manufacturing, how many phones did Apple order from the factories, and they only ordered a small percentage for the Airs. I don't remember if it was 6 to 8%, but it was Apple is not shocked by how much the Air sold. They tried to predict how much it would sell. They told the factories to make that much, and it seems like it's selling that much. So it's not a surprise to them. But Apple keeps losing faith in that slot, saying, oh, we made a mini phone, not enough people buy it. We made a Plus phone, not enough people buy it. We made an Air, not enough people buy it. They're correctly predicting the tiny percentage of people who are going to buy that. But I'm like, again, like, is that the end of the world? Is the phone so expensive that you can't sustain on, 6% of billions of phones? It's still a big number. It's still a lot of phones. So I hope they give this product line a chance. And I also agree with Marco that when I read this, I thought the exact same thing. Like, battery life, the iPhone Air's biggest problem. Nope, I don't think it's the iPhone Air's biggest problem. I would say the camera is the iPhone Air's biggest problem, but everyone's got their own thing. But it seems like battery life is not actually that bad. But anyway, I guess, we'll live through this together. And the weird thing is, like, it used to be we'd wait to September to find out what the phones are like, but now just everything leaks so thoroughly. People on YouTube have the only thing that is not exactly true to form about the phone is that the insides of it don't exist, but like it's a perfect like scale model down to the millimeter. Instead of just being those blanks the case manufacturers do, they like manufacture one that looks like it does. And I guess the most thing we get surprised about is exactly what the color looks like, because we didn't know exactly what the orange would look like until we saw it. So anyway, well, I suspect the plain iPhone 18 will probably leak around the same time as the iPhone 18 Pro, and then we'll just have to wait 6 months for the real thing to ship.
We are sponsored this episode by Gusto. Look, small businesses, oftentimes it's just one or two people there. I'm very familiar with this dynamic. It often means trying to figure out a whole bunch of stuff yourself, and this is not the best strategy. It turns out asking for help and going to experts for certain things is a much better idea. You don't have to spend your evenings guessing at tax forms or tracking down onboarding docs. Gusto handles all of that so you can spend your time on the parts of your business you actually love. Gusto is online payroll and benefits software built for small businesses. It's all-in-one, remote-friendly, and incredibly easy to use, so you can pay, hire, onboard, and support your team from anywhere. There's all these automated tools built right in, offer letters, onboarding materials, direct deposit, and more. And of course, all the features you'd expect from benefits software. Payroll tax filing, simple direct deposits, health benefits, commuter benefits, workers' comp, 401k, you name it. Gusto makes it all simple, and they have options for nearly every budget. You get unlimited payroll runs for one monthly price, no hidden fees, no surprises. And it's quick and simple to switch to Gusto. Just transfer your existing data to get up and running quickly, and you don't pay a cent until you run your first payroll. So check it out today. Try Gusto at gusto.com/ATP and get 3 months free when you run your first payroll. That's 3 months of free payroll at gusto.com/ATP. That's GUSTO.com/ATP. One more time, gusto.com/ATP. Thank you so much to Gusto for sponsoring our show.
iPhone XX or 20 rumors.
Is that going to be called 1010?
I don't know. I put that in there. I think I've seen people talk about that, but like, hey, the iPhone 10 was called iPhone capital X, and it was pronounced 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
What if it's like 10X?
Oh gosh, that would be ridiculous.
Yeah. Anyway, I mean, as Case will read a second, the iPhone 10 was the 10th anniversary phone, and Apple skipped over the 9, right? Yeah, they released the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10, but there was no iPhone 9 because they wanted to get to 10-year anniversary. And, the iPhone 10 was obviously the one with Face ID, and it looked very different. It was a big deal. So the idea is 10 years later, XX?
We shall see. So Julie Clover over at Mac Rumors on the 10th of October. For the 10th anniversary of iPhone that came out in 2017, Apple introduced the iPhone 10 with Face ID, notch and minimized bezels, providing more display space than ever before. The 20th iPhone anniversary is approaching, and Apple wants to take the iPhone 10 design even further. Quick aside, it blows my mind. Like, I get it, but Michaela was born in January of 2018. That means I was using an iPhone with, the home affordance and, I was using this style iPhone. I was using an iPhone 10 when she was born. That both feels impossible and completely right all at the same time. It's just so weird. I don't feel like, she's 7 now, almost 8. And I don't feel like I have had an iPhone without a home button for that long, and yet I feel like I've had an iPhone without a home button forever. So it's very weird. Time. Well, how does it work? Anyways, continuing from Julie. We're 2 years away from the 20th anniversary iPhone in 2027. Here are all the rumors that we have heard so far. First of all screen. Apple's supposedly working on a display that curves down around all four edges of the device for a borderless visual experience. Display analyst Ross Young said that Apple won't have under-display Face ID ready to go for a 2027 iPhone, but other leakers think it's possible. If Apple can't get everything under the display, we may see under-display Face ID and then a small hole punch cutout on the front for the front-facing camera. Then on December 8th, also from Mac Rumors, this time Tim Hardwick, according to a Weibo account that has previously shared accurate supply chain details on Chinese Android hardware, Apple is testing some very fancy special glass. I didn't include that little snippet, but anyway, some special glass is a way to let the True Depth systems infrared sensors pass through the display panel, without distortion. This approach is similar to existing industry techniques that use micro-perforated or nano-patterned glass to selectively improve IR transmission in a localized region above the sensor array. A May report by The Information claimed that iPhone 18 Pro models will have no dynamic island with just a pinhole cutout located at the upper left of the display, but other rumors suggest there's still going to be a dynamic island. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has also spoken of a slimmed-down dynamic island for the iPhone 18 Pro models. Before I move on, any thoughts on this?
And by the way, the micro perforations thing, do you remember when they did that for do they still do it? I don't know, for like the power button on the MacBook Pros, where like there was no hole to see the LED. They just put lots and lots of tiny little holes in the aluminum and the light would shine through it. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, when it would like breathe when it was suspended, which was incredible.
I don't remember if that was the same thing.
Oh, my bad,
Marco,
okay.
If the micro perforations and the breathing were simultaneous, or were they two separate?
I think the micro perforations came after, because that was well within the unibody era. But yeah, it was such a cool effect.
Yeah, it reminds me of this because, like, it's one of those things that looks magical, because if you look at it, it just looks like a piece of aluminum. You can't see where part of the aluminum has a bunch of small holes, and part of it, like, you can't see where when the light is off, you can't see where it's going to be. I guess if you had like a microscope or maybe a magnifying glass, but with your regular eyes, you couldn't see it.
If you knew what to look for, you could see it, but like you'd have to be like looking for it and looking right at it.
And you have to have really good eyes. Like anyway, all this would say is that it is evidence that you can put lots of tiny holes in a thing and not have the thing look like it has lots of tiny holes. And so that lends some feasibility credence to this idea. I mean, obviously Android phones probably already do this with all their through screen fingerprint readers and stuff like that. But that's the idea of like, can we put a Face ID sensor behind the screen so we don't have a notch or a dynamic island or whatever? And Apple's been working on that for a long time. And we'll talk more about the all-screen nature of this phone once we get done with the whole thing. But technology-wise, nothing in here is completely outlandish. It's always just been a question of when will Apple be satisfied with the quality of putting stuff under the screen that is currently not under the screen. So that's the camera, the Face ID sensor, all that stuff. Lots of other phone manufacturers have done it, but Apple has fairly stringent standards about how well all that stuff has to work. So far they haven't done it, but maybe for iPhone XX.
Has anybody done it for the camera though? Because at least like on a flagship phone?
Yeah, I think people have done it for the camera. I think part of the problem with both the camera and Face ID is that you can't see as much. Like the camera loses light, obviously. There's all sorts of problems with putting stuff behind the screen. So if you want the very best front-facing camera, you can't have it under the screen. But maybe at some point, maybe they'll get to a level of quality that Apple finds acceptable.
Yeah, I am a little curious. Like, I could see Apple doing it for the Face ID sensor because that maybe is less sensitive to like getting absolutely every bit of light. But if you're going to put a camera behind a screen, you're going to reduce the amount of light that will hit that sensor. Anything you put in front of a camera, like polarizing films, which would maybe be a similar kind of reduction, those reduce the light by a significant amount, like I think 1 or 2 stops in stop terms usually. And so if you're putting the camera behind the screen, it will reduce the light by quite a bit. That will reduce image quality. And the front-facing camera is really important for selfies and other, so like I can see that maybe being tricky for the non-foldable special phone. Now, in a foldable phone context, the front camera for selfies matters a lot less because you can use the back camera pretty easily for selfies on a foldable, and that's actually one of the greatest reasons to use foldable phones. Is you can use the good camera for selfies and like flip it around in such a way that you can see yourself. Like that's so anyway. Assuming it has a front screen at least, and so that I can see like for the foldable being maybe a thing, but for just like the plain if there's like a slab iPhone flagship of that year, I don't know. I think that's gonna be a tough sell because like you look around, like even Android phones for the most part, most of them still have that hole punch style design, even when they can put other stuff under the screen. Now, all that being said, while we're talking about Face ID and putting stuff under screens, Apple, please make Touch ID under the screen and Face ID in the same phone. Because ever since, we have all these rumors swirling about like the foldable might just have Touch ID now, and everyone's now talking about this again, and everyone's saying how much they hate Touch ID or how much they hate Face ID. I hate them both. They both fail in lots of conditions. Touch ID, we know from many years, Touch ID fails with things like moisture and obviously gloves. Face ID, I don't know if this is a universal thing, but this has been true for me for about the last 2 years through 2 phones, so I know it's not just one phone. Face ID fails in sun. I don't know why, but Face ID seems designed not to work in the sun.
Well, it depends. Like I forget exactly how it is. I think if the Face ID camera is aimed at the sun, it will almost always fail. I have this happen to me occasionally, and it's been the case since Face ID was a thing in 2017, as we relearned recently. But this has always been the case.
I think there's enough failure modes for both technologies that just the realities of them mean that Face ID is obviously going to have problems with certain light hitting the sensor in certain ways. Touch ID is going to obviously have problems with certain contact issues between the sensor and your finger, whether that's water or gloves or whatever. Ideally, I would love a phone, especially a flagship phone, where component costs might not be super substantial. I would love a phone that offered both and gave you an option, even though it would technically be reduced security, gave you an option to just say, read whichever one succeeds first. Like, if either one of them succeeds, let me in. That would be amazing. Talk about like getting people excited about a new iPhone. That would do it. Because then everybody who likes one of those more than the other would all be happy about that phone. So maybe Apple consider that. Assuming that you can't defeat the sun, which I've said it many times, never bet against the smartphone. A lot of people might also say, don't bet against the sun. You kind of can't beat the sun. It's there whether you like it or not. It's super powerful, like the smartphone, right? Even Apple can't beat the sun.
Just wait 5 billion years. That sun's going down.
So, assuming that you can't beat the sun and you can't prevent people from having wet hands sometimes, like, try to just embrace the imperfection of the world that you're operating in. Offer both sensors and let whichever one succeeds first let you into your phone.
Actually, in 5 billion years, I think the sun's going to absorb the Earth, so I think it will win right before it loses. Anyway, the under-screen Face ID, Touch ID thing, obviously Android phones have had that for a while. I've just always been assuming that the accuracy is not up to Apple's Touch ID standards for the under-screen ones.
But the reality is, like, the entire Android world's been doing this forever, and it's fine.
I think they just have lower standards for security, like in terms of how easy it is to fool,
But so what happens then? People who have to enter their passcode a lot end up reducing the security of their passcode. Or the more times you enter it, the more opportunities you have for someone else to scout it.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like the lower quality under-screen thing is less likely to succeed and lead to more passcode entry, not less.
I don't know enough about how that works to say for sure, but like I've seen the passcode, the under-screen Touch ID thing be used on Android phones a lot, and I've never seen it fail.
Yeah, no, I just think the standards are lower for the security of it.
Maybe, but keep in mind, like I recently had to, for years, I have used an alphanumeric passcode, which is just like a password on my phone. And in the last couple years, I've had to enter my passcode so many times that I was like, screw it, I'm going back to a number. And so I actually had to reduce my passcode security because now I'm on a number, which is, not only like, just less entropy there than a passphrase or a password, but also as I'm typing it in, I think it's easier for people to spot what it is if they're looking over my shoulder.
Yeah, for sure. It is.
But I've had to do that because it is just so, it's asking me so often for my passcode in the last year or two. Now, look on a global scale. Like, how many people do you know whose passcode is like 1212 because they are just themselves so tired of entering it constantly, they make it something really simple like that. And then anybody who's ever around them for more than an hour will see them enter their passcode at some point. Like, that's so common. If Face ID and Touch ID are so strict that they are causing a lot of lockout, that people are having to enter their passcode a lot all the time, it's like when you make password requirements so strict, people write it down on a Post-it note next to the computer. It's the same version of that for the phone. Like, if you make the phone super strict with their security and causes a lot of, lockouts, they're just going to switch to simpler passcodes that will overall reduce their security. So it is better if you can find a way to offer people secure entry that doesn't fail so often and lock them out so often. That is generally better.
I think the Face ID problem is probably just basically dynamic range of like the IR that it is emitted and bounced off your face. It has to be able to see that, right? And so if your face or the sensor being blasted by the full light of the sun, can you pick out the infrared dots that are there? Because there's infrared light coming from other places. I don't know what the problem is with the sun. I haven't actually experienced that, but I doubt that it happens.
You never go in the sun.
Yeah, I do occasionally. But anyway, your real problem here, Marco, is this. Well, so as setting aside the security things and when are these things up to Apple standard, and the other part of that is how much does Apple really, really, really want to have an all quote unquote all screen iPhone XX, whatever. Maybe that will motivate them to lower their standards and make the thing or whatever. But the real problem is Apple's cheapness. They won't put both Face ID and Touch ID because it would cost them more money. And because they're going to be like, can't we just pick one? I mean, just look at how long they've taken them to not put Face ID on the Mac, which is a much more expensive thing that has a much more controlled environment a lot of the time, depending on laptops, blah, blah, blah. So I think that, like, even if the technology exists to do both of them, Apple's inclination for the entire history of the phone has been absolutely, we will not do both of them. We will do one or the other. Look at the iPads. They do one or the other. They don't do both. They could do both on the iPad right now, but they do not. And, obviously side button, not under screen. And there's, there's not a lot of room for, I don't know how much room the under screen one takes up, but it's probably non-zero. The other problem you have, Marco, is that if and when they actually do this, John Turners takes over, fixes everything, Touch ID and underscreen Touch ID and Face ID and all the phones, yada, yada. There's a tiny window when this will be useful to you because according to my parents, Touch ID doesn't work for old people.
Yeah, you've talked about this many times.
Because their fingerprints, because their finger skin is too loosey-goosey, they absolutely cannot or could not use Touch ID across many, many devices and many, many years. I don't know if this is just them. They claim it's all old people, but there's only a matter of time, Marco, before Touch ID becomes useless to you, according to my parents. So you got to hope is a turnover in Apple leadership, a change in attitude about picking one authentication device and only one authentication device for a device, and then rolling that out before your fingers become too old and saggy to use Touch ID.
I mean, hopefully I'm only 43. Like, hopefully I have a little while before that happens.
37. I'm not old. I'm 37.
I don't know what that's from.
Nope, nothing.
I think maybe you're underestimating how long it will take Apple to have a change of heart about this.
All right, coming back to the iPhone XX display. Apple is planning to use a brighter, thinner OLED panel for the 20th anniversary of iPhone. Rumors suggest that Apple will adopt Samsung OLED displays with color filter on encapsulation, or COE technology. COE displays remove the polarizing film from an OLED panel, applying the color filter directly onto the encapsulation layer of the display. Reflections are harder to deal with when there's no polarizing film, but in this year's iPhones, Apple added a new anti-reflective coating that could be improved for future versions of the iPhone. With deeply curved edges, Apple also plans to add a crater-shaped light diffusion layer that will provide uniform brightness across the display.
All right, so these whole kind of like curved around the edge kind of displays. Is this a good idea? Like, I know Samsung phones have done this for a million years.
And they stopped doing it. I
already have occasional challenges with accidental input as bezels of everything have shrunk. And I'm not going to argue that the bezels on the iPhone should get thicker because I know it looks really great the way it is now, and that's true. And people do buy these things based on looks to a large degree. But every time the bezels shrink, I have more accidental input around the screen edges. And obviously the phone has software to try to detect that and kind of try to reject certain ones of those, but that also just makes it so that input is less reliable when those systems are active, and so that's not great either. Also, phone cases exist.
When you say you have accidental input around the edges, I think you're describing what I've noticed, which has been bad for a long time, but it's gotten worse for me in the last year or two. I don't know how to describe this in an eloquent way, and it would be easier if I had a visual aid, but I feel like my palm meat on my hands is hitting the very edges of the display and doing like button activations and stuff.
It is.
And it's driving me freaking bonkers. And it wasn't until you said something that it occurred to me, I wonder if it is because the bezels are so darn thin now.
Yes, that definitely happens. Now, historically, the iPhone has been a little smart about it, so I don't think I've ever had confirmation on this, but the way I think it works, just based on observation, is I think when you wake up the phone, if any part of your palm or hand is touching an edge, I think it just ignores that area until the next time the phone is slept or changed in some way. So it does kind of like automatic rejection of things that are like that, like we're touching when you turned it on. But sometimes that also means then those areas like are dead zones until you sleep and wake up the phone again. Like, so when you do want to interact with those areas, if you lift up whatever palm is touching it and poke it with a finger, sometimes I've had that not work until I slept the phone and woke up back up. And so I don't know if that's an application layer bug or if that's like if the phone is doing that like at kind of like the screen touch driver kind of level. I don't know. But that's always been, I've always observed that on iPhones, and I don't know if I'm characterizing it correctly or not, but that seems like what it's doing. But as the phone bezels have gotten smaller, especially as you don't use a case, this is extra noticeable. And it's like I notice it when I've been using a case for a while, and then I switch back to not using a case. I notice I have a lot more of that kind of either accidental input or inadvertent like input lockout around the edges. So it is definitely a thing. And again, whether the specifics are actually working that way, I don't know. Hopefully somebody at Apple can write in and tell us. But as you shrink the bezels, you create more problems like this. Now, you also create a big problem of not only are you going to be touching these parts of the screens inadvertently as you hold the phone, but since so many people, I would say probably the majority by a long shot, use cases with their phones, how do you design a case to attach and wrap around a phone's edges if the edges are screen content? And I think the answer probably is you just ignore it, you cover as little as you can, and you hope the software doesn't put anything useful there. And probably the software wouldn't put anything useful there. So I'm sure, in iOS terms, it would be in the safe area. And apps would, be inset with all their content would be inset around, to be pulled in from the safe area. Right now we have that on top and bottom, and we would just have it on all four sides, which Liquid Glass is obviously made to account for and to accommodate. So what we would be adding in this situation is basically blurry background content wrapping around a part of the phone that your hand is covering or a case is covering largely. So why? What's the point? Why would we do that if what we're really going to be filling it with is blurry background colors that most people won't even see?
You could ask the same questions about Liquid Glass. And we have no answer there either. It's part of the Android, I don't know if it's just Samsung, but part of the Android phone version of this, there's the waterfall edge where the screen actually curves around the side of the thing. There was some notion, especially early on, of putting content essentially on the side of your phone, like text or words or things along the edge that you could read from the side, because it wrapped around so much in some of those phones that you could look at the phone from the side and see screen. Yeah. And I think I saw at least one ad that was like, and look, you can put content there. You'll be shocked to learn that I'm pretty sure that did not catch on. It's an awful idea.
And it does, like in marketing, it does look cool.
Mm-hmm. It looks cool in person too.
Yeah, you can imagine like if your phone is face down on a desk or table, you could maybe have the edge show you like one line of text. And yeah, you can. No one did.
Or it could light up on the edge more easily, like project out light from the edges and do little There's lots of fun things that you could do with it, but like until these phones levitate in front of us, we have to grab it with something. And the part that we're going to end up covering up parts of the screen. Like I think that and these are still just rumors, but I think the main thing against this design is that despite all the things we're saying about it, it's been tried. It's been done. It did not catch on. Like the market essentially said, nah, not interested. And it's not because there was like some other mitigating factor where there was a big, powerful company saying we don't like that or whatever. It was some of the biggest Android phone manufacturers did it. And it was not popular enough for them to keep doing it. Now, maybe when Apple does it, everyone will copy them again because people will copy Apple no matter what they do. Right. So maybe this will give a resurgence in this type of thing. But yeah, it's very much like the liquid glass stuff. It's like someone thinks this is going to be a cool idea, but practically it's not good and has lots of impractical effects. So we should keep reading this because there's more. You brought up cases and there's a little bit of that at the end here too. But like as the rumored shape of this iPhone XX comes into view, it starts to seem very strange.
All right, solid-state buttons. Reading from a different post on Mac Rumors, Apple is developing a solid-state button system as a wholesale replacement for the device's traditional mechanical buttons, as per a Weibo account. Back in 2022, several reports suggested Apple intended to bring solid-state buttons to the iPhone 15 Pro in 2023 as part of Project Bongo. However, the plan was reportedly canceled at a late stage. They were then rumored to come up to the iPhone 16 Pro before being shelved indefinitely. According to the leaker, Apple's solid-state button design has completed functional verification and includes haptic feedback for the side button, volume buttons, action button, and camera control button.
Yeah, so now this is an all-screen phone, which if you believe the maximal rumors, it doesn't even, everything is under the screen. The screen wraps around all the edges. There's no bezels at all. There's no buttons on it because everything is a solid-state button with haptic feedback.
Camera. Apple might adopt a camera sensor using LOFIC, or lateral overflow integration capacitor, for better dynamic range. This would join improvements rumored for the iPhone 18 models, like a variable lens aperture. The upgraded sensor would be able to capture up to 20 stops of dynamic range. LOFIC enables each pixel to store varying amounts of light based on scene brightness. This allows a sensor to capture detail in both bright highlights and dark shadows within a single frame. According to an account on the Korean language Naver blog, Chinese manufacturers including Honor, Xiaomi, and Huawei plan to adopt LOFIC technology in their 2026 flagship smartphones using new Sony sensors, while Oppo and Vivo are developing LOFIC-equipped models for release next year.
This is the one part of the iPhone 20 rumor that's just a straight up better cameras. Good. I like the idea of like this new sensor type, like letting it not do like two exposures at different, they're doing a dark exposure and a light exposure to combine them, but it has a wide enough range that you can do a single exposure. So that's cool if that ends up being the case. And a variable aperture, again, that's been rumored for a while. I'm not sure if phones are already shipping with that, but what that means is that a little tiny mechanical thing that makes a hole bigger and smaller inside the camera exists. That's not how any past iPhone camera has worked. That's how big cameras work. You can change the aperture. That would be a useful thing, but boy, stuff is tiny in there. I'm not sure how they would pull this off, but that would sure be neat. And it definitely give you a lot of flexibility in camera apps to do some stuff that you can't do as easily right now. Although, honestly, just to get enough light on the sensor, it'd probably be wide open almost all the time anyway. But this all sounds cool. So this is like the one thing, the one rumor that I hope is true and that I don't think there's anything bad about it.
Yeah, that's honestly, if they can achieve that dynamic range increase on the sensor, that's huge. That matters a lot in all photography, and especially in phone photography, where you often don't have time to worry too much about the exposure of whatever you're shooting. And are the highlights going to blow out? Like, no, you just take your phone out, boom, shoot. And right now, phones are already, and have been for some time, way better than professional cameras at that particular scenario of like, I have a scene with a wide dynamic range happening here, and I want to shoot something reliably that's going to be good and properly exposed and not blown out, with very little effort and very little time. Right now, phones are best at that, because what they usually do is take a quick burst of 3 to 5 or whatever, however we are up to these days, quick shots all in a row, and they merge them together into like a merged HDR image. Well, if this sensor technology advancement does what is promised here and allows that same level of dynamic range possibly to be captured in a single frame and therefore be captured in every frame, That's a significant improvement. That can help things like sharpness, because when you capture 3 quickly in a row, you know things might have moved during that time. You have to kind of account for that. Like there's all sorts of ways that can play out in very positive ways. So if that is true and if that works very well, that alone, that dynamic range improvement, that's a significant improvement for much of photography, much of the time.
All right, and then probably to wrap up for today, Apple's exploring touch-sensitive layers built into official iPhone cases, reading from Mac Rumors from mid-November. According to a known Weibo-based leaker, Apple is looking to make protective cases for its Pro models that directly integrate touch-based sensor layers. The leaker provided no further details, but there are some clues to be found in previous research conducted by Apple. A patent application filed by the company in 2024 describes a case with input for an electronic device and outlines a protective iPhone case designed to act as an input surface rather than passive shielding. The patent also details how the case communicates with the device using identification and signal transfer through interfaces such as NFC. Some versions also include provisions for biometric input, allowing a Touch ID fingerprint sensor in the case to unlock features in the phone, for example. What makes the idea more timely is that Apple is said to be pursuing a radical redesign for its 20th anniversary iPhone with a display that curves around all 4 edges of the device. This approach could leave almost no room for mechanical buttons. Indeed, there have been reports that Apple may shift to solid-state capacitive layers on the anniversary model, enabling a visually uninterrupted design that could make an interactive case a natural companion.
So I think this, I'm thinking of this as iPhone XX because it is so much like the iPhone X, which had a big capital X, which was a complete departure from the phone design that had existed basically since the original iPhone, having a screen, a home button, and just like that whole thing of saying, you know, the iPhone X is going to be, it's like the future. It's all screen. I mean, the iPhone X was essentially all screen, and the notch is there. Previously, we hadn't cut out any portion of the screen. And it seemed very strange that they did that. And it was all, you know, we didn't know if we were going to get used to it. And obviously it's the dynamic island now, but like they're going to go all screen. But I think, as I said, when they rolled out the iPhone X, I said, Apple does not want this notch to be there. It's just, it has to be there now. But when they can get rid of it, they will. So here's the rumor they're going to go all screen again. Now, the iPhone X was not a sure thing when it was released because it was so different. And yes, sometimes the home buttons broke, but Touch ID was in the home button, which was a very amazing transition of like, you know how we've had this button on our phone? Well, you're putting your finger there anyway. Guess where we're going to put the fingerprint sensor? And like, there's no way that can work. And wow, it did. And like, it was so natural. You take the phone out of your pocket, you press the button, your thumb is already on there, it reads Touch ID. So synergistic. And the iPhone X just threw all that away. Said, nope, no home button, no whatever we call that chin on the phone where the home button was, which was a region of the phone that you could touch and know you weren't going to mess with the screen that was very big because that's where the home button was. That's all gone too. And in its place is Face ID. It's going to read my face. Does it work in the dark? Can I fool it with a photograph? Can I fool it with a mannequin's head? Do you remember all that conversation? Mm-hmm. And the upshot was that the iPhone X, I think, was just a triumph. Like that way of making phones has proven to be better. There are trade-offs with all these things, but since the iPhone X, every iPhone has been like that, and it's been a hit. We use them, we like them. Yes, some people wish Touch ID was still there, especially in the early years. People complained about it, but net, billions of consumers with billions of iPhones have decided that design with no button on it. I mean, Michaela, as you just noted, has never lived in a world without that design. That's just what phones are like to modern people, is the iPhone X design of just, it's a screen. It's got some portion of it cut out because we got stuff that, you know, cameras and sensors or whatever. You unlock it by looking at it. You flick up on the thing. Like, that worked. This iPhone XX thing, which is like, okay, it's like the iPhone X, but like the screen goes even more around and we don't have any room for any buttons anymore. And everything is solid state. I don't know what this is bringing me. That like the iPhone X brought a different set of trade-offs that I think are better for me and for most people. This brings a whole bunch of new compromises in exchange for being cool.
See also iPhone Air.
Yeah. Do I get more? I guess I get a little bit more screen. Like, I like the idea of getting the notch of the dynamic island because that does cut into your image. Like, there's parts of your screen you can't use because there's no pixels there, especially if you're watching like landscape video. It has to either, you know, you're either missing some of the picture or it's got to shrink up, or like depending on the aspect ratio of what you're watching, yada yada, right? But like that's clearly been a compromise. So I'm all for getting rid of that. But every other change described here, we need the screen to wrap around the edges for similarly stupid reasons to the stupid things we did in liquid glass. That there's no benefit to that, right? And there's lots of problems. But now we can't have buttons. Let's make all the buttons haptic. I mean, the camera control has not been a huge hit, and even that is a physical button that goes in and out despite all its like other stuff that it has in it. I'm not entirely against haptic buttons because they did it with the home button and it was actually really great. But I'm not clamoring for them either. I mean, maybe there's a failure rate that I don't know about on the things. Like, and then this rumor about the touch sensitive things being put into phone cases, they're saying like, okay, so if the buttons are like haptic and touch sensitive, are they kind of like the camera control and that case manufacturers have to do a thing that transfers the fact that you're touching it? I mean, the only reason they need to do that for the camera control is because of the swipey stuff. Because again, the camera control literally does physically move in and out, so they don't need it for the button press. But now case manufacturers have to be involved to deal with these haptic buttons. Then the other part of this, the other hopeful part, is based on a patent, which means you could probably just forget it because Apple patents everything, doesn't mean they're ever going to ship it. But it does hint at a design that, again, other phones have done in the past, which is like, how about don't put the touch thing on the screen and also don't try to jam it on the side like they do on the iPads because there's not a lot of room there, but you got the whole back of the phone. Couldn't you put a fingerprinty thing there? And it's like, yeah, but what about people with cases? Well, if you had this magical case, they could transfer the thing through and yada, yada, whatever. Like, you have a lot of leeway to do fingerprint sensing on the back of a phone with some flexibility. Now, it's harder to aim. On the screen, you can say, please put your finger here. People put their hands in different places. Like, I don't really believe this rumor, but at least if that was part of the iPhone 20 rumor, that they're going to put Touch ID on the back and Face ID in the front, then I would be like, okay, well now I'm getting something, because we had the Touch ID, or we had the the home button era, then we had the Touch ID era, then we had the Face ID era, and then the third era would be Touch ID and Face ID, but the touch is on the back, or maybe the touch is on the back and the front, or whatever. But like this idea of so I keep picturing it as like kind of a lozenge shaped phone that is like more than 50% screen. The screen wraps around all the edges, and it's everywhere, and it doesn't appeal to me in a like, I was nervous about the iPhone 10, but it turned out great. I am nervous about this phone now, if it is as rumored, and I'm less confident that it's going to turn out great. So we'll see. But I just the whole reason this thing is in here is because I'm like, 20th anniversary phone. I'm not excited for it. I'm excited for the camera, but you can put that on like a quote unquote normal phone. Like, and we'll see. Like, again, I felt like I would have had the exact same attitude had I known more about the iPhone 10 before it was released, and it turned out great. But I'm not optimistic about this right now.
I mean, I don't know. I think I am cautiously optimistic. It sounds like it'll be really, really, really cool. But the iPhone Air is, to me, very cool, and there is no chance I'm going to run that as a daily driver. There's not enough battery, certainly not a good enough camera, just for me, And I know several of our friends are really loving it, and I am genuinely happy for them. Not for me, though. And I wonder if this will be a similar situation.
Well, this doesn't have any of those compromises, though. Like, this is going to be like, it's a flagship phone. It's going to have all the cameras, all the tech, all the battery. It's not going to be super duper thin. Like, there's the folding phone, thing for that. Like, this just seems like the iPhone 10. It's like the flagship phone. It's got the most of everything in it. It's the fastest processor. It's the best cameras. It's the most cameras. It's the most pixels. It's the most screen. It's the most technology. It's just, I guess it's mostly the wraparound screen and the haptic buttons, I think, right now are bad ideas. Now, I can't say that because I haven't seen them. Maybe they're actually great, because I would have said that the haptic home button was also a bad idea, but by the end of the haptic home button, I liked it better than the regular home button. So it's hard to predict how these things are going to go. Wraparound screen, I'm a little bit more confident with, like I said, because it has been done before. And it's not like, oh, they didn't do a good job with it, but Apple will do a good job. I think they did as good a job as you could do with the wraparound screen. Like, it was a screen that wrapped around. And then it's just a new place for you to break your phone, by the way, Casey, because now when you drop it, if it hits on the edge, you can crack the screen from the edge too.
Yep. Thought about that immediately.
No, I definitely think like if it would rely on like all of these special case considerations, that's going to make it a no-go for so many people, because like, how many people do you see using third-party cases? It's almost everyone.
Well, like you said, they'll just cover it up. I bet they'll just cut third-party cases will just cover up all that side screen.
Right, well, because otherwise, how, like, what people buy cases for?
Protection, yeah.
You have to protect everything about the phone, including all of the edges. That's why, much to John's chagrin, they all have, closed bottoms now, because everybody wants protection edge to edge, because that's what most people need. So, like, I could see that being a problem. But I think, though, I can see why this could end up being really weird and bad. I don't think it will. I think they're going to succeed in making something that is really cool. My question, though, is, again, like what Casey was saying, like the iPhone Air. The iPhone Air looks cool, but people are not choosing it in large numbers. Why? Because people tend to have one phone for a pretty long time, and they need it to serve them everywhere and do everything for them and always be ready and be able to take on whatever challenge they might find in their lives during the few years they're going to have that phone. So people don't buy weird convertible phones. They buy SUV phones because they want something that's going to, do everything for them all the time. The iPhone Air is really cool in certain ways, but made some really big trade-offs. And most people are not choosing the phone that made those trade-offs. With this rumored iPhone 20, we don't actually know what the trade-offs are necessarily. Like, we can guess it's probably going to be the flagship high-end phone, so it's not going to have severe cost constraints. It's probably going to not be the absolute thinnest, although I would say they're probably going to try to make it very thin. But other things can fall out of that. So, for instance, as you make the phone thinner, well, do you include the camera bump in that? If so, you're going to reduce the camera quality. That is a big problem for people. Are you going to reduce the battery capacity? That's a big problem for people. As we see with the Air, are you going to maybe make the speakers not as good? That's a big problem for people. There's a lot, like everything that is made worse about the phone in exchange for whatever is making it cool is going to lop off parts of the market that would have bought that phone but now won't. How many chunks are you going to lop off and how big are they? That's the question. The iPhone Air lopped off some really big ones, and that's why not a lot of people are choosing to buy it. But this might be a different set. Hopefully it's a less extreme set. And maybe the wraparound screen, maybe that's just like a really minor little detail that most people don't really notice most of the time because it's covered up in cases, and it turns out it doesn't matter at all.
Yeah, maybe it doesn't wrap around as much as those old Android phones did. Maybe it's essentially, it doesn't wrap around at all, but essentially it's like zero bezel.
Right, or maybe it wraps around like, a couple of millimeters into the edge, but like it's not like you wouldn't necessarily be able to read something on the side.
Yeah, like that you wouldn't see it from the edge. Like, again, this is hard to tell with rumors until we start getting like case designs, because that I feel like is the most difficult one. The haptic buttons, as I think we discussed with the 15 Pro, that they were going to do like the haptic volume buttons where it's just one thing. I mean, that could work. Again, they have the history of the home button making it work, but complications in case design, like it hasn't been terrible with the whole thing with like camera control with the cutouts and then case manufacturers taking a while to have the pass through. It's just a little bit of an annoyance. So I guess there's that transition period. I mean, if you remember with the iPhone 10, the thing about the iPhone 8 that was released alongside it was it still had the home button. So Apple was hedging its bet saying, we got this new thing, but if you don't, like to Marco's point, if you look at this and you feel like it's making trade-outs you don't agree with, we do have the old thing that you're used to over there. But I feel like when they ran that experiment, they were like, oh no, 10 is the way to go. And so from that point on, it was like, I mean, they kept around Touch ID phones for a while or whatever, but it was like full steam ahead. Like our mainline flagship phones are going to be iPhone 10-ish phones from now on, and they never looked back. And I'm assuming they want that to happen as well. So maybe the version I'm conjuring in my head that has like the worst possible wraparound screen and like the worst possible haptic buttons is not realistic for Apple, who thus far has not really screwed up a flagship phone, especially not a radical. Granted, there's only been a couple of radical redesigns of the phone. I guess the iPhone 4. I mean, there's been a bunch of ones. There's the 4, the 6, the bendy 6, then I guess the 10, and I guess 20 would be the next one. They haven't really screwed it up too badly ever, and they usually do a good job. So I should give them the benefit of the doubt. I'm just a little bit nervous about it.
We are sponsored this episode by DeleteMe. DeleteMe makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data from hundreds of data brokers online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. So data brokers are those sites that, like, if you do a search for your own name on the internet, you'll find all these sites that are like advertising giving away your home address or your phone number, look up your contact info, your relatives' names. Those are data brokers. They trade everyone's data. They accumulate as much as possible, and they try to sell it to whoever wants to come by and give them a few bucks for it. So it's a creepy business, and it can be like, your contact information, your social security number, maybe even your family members' names. Like, it gets really creepy really quickly. Now, they all have to have like delete protocols and opt-out forms and everything, but they're all different, and there's hundreds of them, and there's new ones popping up all the time. So what DeleteMe does is they learn how to opt you out of every single one of those sites they can find. And as new ones come up, DeleteMe develops the same opt-out protocols for those too. So you go to DeleteMe, and they will opt you out for whatever info you want for you and or your family. You can have them opt you out of all of the data brokers they know about all at the same time. And they monitor this, and they repeatedly keep checking back in, so they will be able to constantly monitor and constantly keep filing whatever takedowns they have to file to get your data off those sites. It's a great service for this. I personally, when I was looking for one of these a few years back, before they were a sponsor, I looked up what was best, and DeleteMe showed up, and sure enough, I've been very happy with it. Wirecutter recommends them too. It's a great service. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for DeleteMe, now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your DeleteMe plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/ATP and use promo code ATP at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/ATP and enter code ATP at checkout. That's joindeleteme.com/ATP, code ATP. Thanks to DeleteMe for sponsoring our show.
Let's do some Ask ATP. And Tyler Kindy writes, how do you all manage your contacts? Do you use Apple's Contacts app or a different one? Do you sync your contacts using iCloud, your email provider, or some other service? Do you tend to keep your contacts up to date with current addresses, birth dates, etc., or just keep it at the bare minimum? For me, I use the Contacts app. Well, I only ever access it on the phone via the phone app, but on the Mac, I'll use the Contacts app. Anyways, I store everything in there. I sync via iCloud, and that seems to work pretty well for me. Amongst my friends, both online and in real life, I am the weirdo that keeps track of any date I can get my hands on, any address I can get my hands on, because you never know when you need it. So I will put birthdays in there. I'll put anniversaries in there if I know them, just because sometimes it's nice to know that information. So you can tell someone happy anniversary, and they're like, what, you weirdo? Oh, thanks. Anyways, but no, I am a pack rat when it comes to many digital things, including contact information, and iCloud works just fine for me. Let's go to Marco next, please. Marco, what do you do?
So first of all, whenever Casey wishes me a happy anniversary, I never think, what a weirdo. I always think, damn it, I wish I was as good of a person as Casey.
Oh, that's very kind of you, but I think I'm dancing right on the line between weirdo and considerate. So you all can decide. That's
like Casey, and Casey is also almost always the first person that you see online wishing people happy birthday on that day.
Well, that's because I wake up early.
Whether it's in Slack or on, back in the old days it was on Twitter or, now a mess. Like, Casey's always right there, first thing in the morning, happy birthday so-and-so. So it's wonderful being in Casey's world, because he wishes everyone happy everything, and he makes us all wish we were as nice as him. Okay, now,
that's
how I manage my contacts. I have been using Apple's Contacts app for a very long time. iCloud syncing, once it became available, has been fine for me. I think I even used mobile me syncing before that, and I think that was fine too.
It was not fine.
For me, I'm saying. I know for a lot of people it was not. But for me, it's been fine. I don't think I've ever caught a sync bug with the Contacts app. I do, as mentioned a couple episodes ago, I do wish they would add an archive status on contacts or something similarly equivalent, so that I wouldn't need all of the people I have ever known to be one accidental tap or search away from accidentally calling in a weird way. I would love that concept, but barring that, it's been fine. As for how I keep things current, back when my wife and I used to send out Christmas cards, like seasonal Christmas cards every year, I would, whenever I'd get somebody's new address, I'd put it in their contact card. But we kind of ran out of time and stopped doing that a few years ago. And ever since then, I've kind of been like, well, I don't know where anybody lives. Like as long as people didn't move, I still have their address. But if you moved in the last year, I don't know where you live. But it's fine. And birthdays, I try to keep track of the ones that are close to me. It's a very short list, and I don't need to keep track of that many because Casey does it for me.
You're welcome. This is a service I provide. John, what do you got?
I use Apple's Contacts. I use iCloud syncing with it. I try to keep it mostly up to date. Birthdays, I don't think I keep a lot of birthdays in there. I don't know. I'm trying to kind of do demand page birthday stuff when, I find out it's someone's birthday. In the past several years, I've been asking them what year they were born, because what I want to just know is not just that it's their birthday, but how old they are. So I don't want to just put like March 5th is their birthday. I need a year. So because then if you have that in there, if you had it in your Apple Contacts thing, your phone will say it's blah, blah, blah's 22nd birthday. So you don't have to do math in your head or whatever, just tells you how old they are. So I've been trying to keep the birthday things up to date. I also try to keep the addresses up to date. We still do send out holiday cards. Here's my request. Marco just talked about archive contacts. I've wanted forever and still want the exact same thing I wanted forever in Photos, which is shared contacts, like family shared contact thingies, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's such a low volume of data compared with Photos. It seems like it's so straightforward. They should just do it. I'm glad that contacts now sync reliably. They didn't always do that back in the bad old days. But because the problem is my wife also uses Apple Contacts, and she has people's birthdays and anniversaries and mailing addresses. And so I have we have almost a huge overlap, like 90% of the same contacts, but they diverge massively. So anytime we want to look up anything about a person, we have to compare notes. What do you have for this person? What do you have? Is that the right? Is that the current address, or is this the current? Is that the right phone number? Is that we have different birthdays? Is like that problem could be solved. The second wrinkle I have is so I use Apple Contacts and I try to keep them up to date. I also curate a nice collection of photos for people who I frequently message. So they have the photos that I want. I keep those photos in a folder somewhere else because they constantly get overwritten by things. Anyway. The other thing I really want out of the contacts syncing service, actually I had a note about this. Let me see if I can look it up. No, I guess the family share thing is the only thing I need to talk about right now. The wrinkle on my end is that I don't use an email client that has access to Apple Contacts. So I've got this big contacts thing with everyone's email address in it, but I use the Gmail web interface and it has its own contacts database. That has no connection to the Apple Contacts database. And you would think this would be a terrible problem, but it is not. It's just not. I never look things up in Google Contacts. And I guess I don't send a lot of outgoing email, or if I do, it's from like they've emailed me recently. Like, I can't explain it. It seems like it should be an awful problem, but I've been doing it for, I don't know, a decade or like since Gmail has existed. I don't pay any attention to Gmail contacts. I don't curate them. I don't edit them. There's nothing in them. The only thing that's in them is the stuff that gets auto-populated by Gmail. So yeah, that's what I do with contacts. It's a giant cesspool, a giant auto-completing cesspool in Gmail where I do most of my emailing, but in practice it doesn't matter. And then my actual contacts database, which I use for everything else and I try to keep nice.
All right, Dmitry Myronenko writes, how do you all handle version control in your apps? For my personal projects, I use either public or private GitHub repos. However, if I had an app as a business, uploading my code anywhere online feels very insecure, but only having a copy of this source code locally and via Backblaze is also an invitation for disaster. Do you run your own Git server offsite? This is the sort of thing that I would very much do, and I very much do not. I use GitHub. I use private GitHub repos for anything that's private. Public in the rare occasion I'm trying to do something out in the wild, but that's fine. There are so many more important things stored on GitHub that if somebody really wants my source code that badly, like, have at it. And that's not an invitation. That's not a challenge, for goodness sakes. But you know what I mean? Like, I am such a small fish in such a giant ocean that I'm not too worried about it. And I like that I have GitHub, to not only back things up, not only to store things, it's always available, asterisk, et cetera, et cetera. I also super duper love the way GitHub Issues works and the wiki and stuff like that. And I presume if I self-hosted, a lot of that would come with it. But I like having that taken care of for me. I pay the $50-ish a year in order to have an account. I probably don't even need to anymore, come to think of it, because they made their free plan a lot more robust a couple of years back. But anyway, I pay about $50 a year to GitHub, and it's been working out great for me so far. Don't plan to change. Since I started with Marco last time, let's go to John first.
Yeah, just use GitHub for everything, private and public. The great thing about Git is that, everybody who has the repo cloned has all the info in the repo as of the last time they did a pull. So if anything disastrous ever happens with GitHub, I've probably got I haven't lost anything. Like I've got multiple machines here with the whole repo on them, especially whichever one I just pushed from has the latest stuff in it. And then the other good thing about Git is it's just a bunch of boring plain files. So that means all my backups have all those .git directories in them that have all the info. So I'm not worried about GitHub. I mean, to Casey's point, it's a pretty big thing. So it is an attractive target, but I'm not an attractive sub-target within that target. Microsoft's been doing some kind of crummy stuff with GitHub, but the good thing about Git is you don't like it, you can move someplace else and have a different origin server. So yeah, just plain old GitHub and Git repos. That's what I do for all my source stuff. Even when, the default in Xcode, if you start a new Xcode project, I think a little checkbox is checked that says, do you want me to make a local Git repo for you? And I always just leave that checked. Even for little toy projects that I make locally, I always just use Git locally. And then if I decide, actually this is for a bug reproduction, then I just change the origin to be GitHub and push it up there. I actually used to have a little note because I could never remember the freaking Git commands to do that. But now GitHub, when you make a new repo, GitHub puts those instructions right on the page because They know what's happening. They're like, look, we know you're probably going to do this. You probably already made the repo on your computer. You've probably been doing stuff with it, and you probably now want it to be point to this empty GitHub repo that you just copy and paste these things. It's very convenient. So that's it.
Marco.
Mine's also really boring. I host my stuff on GitHub, private and public. Like Casey, I used to pay for the private plan. I now don't because they made everything that I paid for free.
Yeah, I use the free plan too.
Yeah, and it's fine. I've never had a problem with GitHub. I know, relying on something like that is not always perfect and is not, frankly, always my style, as many of you know. But in this case, self-hosting it would be, it's like hosting your own email. It's yeah, you can, but why? Although it's a lot easier than hosting your own email.
Well, the Git, because like I said, Git is so portable. The whole point of it's decentralized. The whole point of it is that anyone who has, everyone has everything. It's not like, all my history's on GitHub, but I only have my local. No, your local thing has all the history. That's the whole point. It is the most portable thing you could ever be, right? And there are so many other servers that can be the origin server for your Git repo. We're just using GitHub now, but if they ever go bad, we are all so protected by the decentralized nature of Git, unless there's tons of development going on in the repo that we're not doing. But as solo developers working on solo projects, presumably there's at least one computer locally that has all the history in it because that's where the last push came from.
Yeah. Also, regarding the idea that hosting your business code would be insecure, as long as you're hosting it somewhere, I would say the odds of GitHub being hacked are probably lower than the odds of your server being hacked. When it comes to the main stuff like this, the big tech giants have a really good track record for security. When was the last time iCloud got hacked or Gmail? What about Outlook? Never. You never hear about this.
I don't know. I mean, they could be getting hacked and just not telling us about it.
Well, yeah, but you by hitching yourself to that ship, whatever the metaphor is.
Wagon.
Yeah, but thanks. If GitHub is hacked, the world has many bigger problems. And then finally, I would also suggest that suppose in that nightmare scenario, suppose GitHub gets hacked and somebody can read your source code along with probably everyone else's. First of all, why would they look at yours? Second of all, if they do look at your source code, this seems like this is the software version of oh my God, they're seeing me naked and learning all of my secrets. You would that feels like a really just nightmare scenario thing. But when I think, like, what would somebody do with my code? I mean, first of all, if they want to fix some bugs for me, that'd be great. They can also run their own Linode cluster for $9,000 a month, and that I'm sure they would do fine. But ultimately, like, what are they going to do? My app is mine because of the customers, the brand reputation, like, the app store listings, like all these other assets that wouldn't be able to be stolen so easily if you just had a copy of the source code. You could upload your own you could take my app code and make a clone and upload it to the App Store, but you need to write the whole backend, or host the whole backend, which is a separate repo. So if you only have one, you might not have the other, but whatever. Host the backend, and then again, the level of complexity it would take to actually do something with that would be a lot. I don't think the value of losing your source code in some kind of leak or hack is as high as most people think. And you can verify that by looking at situations where occasionally some high-profile source code has been leaked or has been stolen or somehow exfiltrated from its company. What has happened? Not much. If you're a big enough company, if you're doing operating systems, if the source code to Windows or Mac OS leaks, which I think for Windows, I think it did. Didn't a somewhat modern version of Windows have a source code leak about 5 or 10 years ago?
I think so.
Anyway, so there's security risks of maybe somebody, by seeing your source code, maybe they could find a vulnerability that they can exploit.
But keep in mind that the core OS for iOS and Mac OS and all of Apple's OS is actually open source. And you want to find a security flaw in the kernel code is open source. So have at it.
Right. And so I think the actual risk profile of having someone else look at your code is way lower than most developers think. And the actual risk of something like GitHub being hacked and allowing access to your code that you didn't authorize, that is also very unlikely. And the odds of you getting hacked yourself, either your computer getting hacked and the local copy of your source code on your computer somehow being stolen, or however you would host it on whatever server you would put it on, I think the odds are much higher of a loss that way than of GitHub being hacked. All right. Thanks to our sponsors this week, Gusto, Zapier, and DeleteMe. And thanks to our members who support us directly. You can join us at atp.fm/join. One of the perks of membership is ATP Overtime, our weekly bonus topic. This week on Overtime, we're talking about the RAM shortage that's happening recently, and kind of the flip side of the Apple Intelligence RAM dividend that we've been talking about a few times in the recent past. So you can join us to listen to atp.fm/join. You'll hear that and every other member-exclusive content bit that we do. Every episode, occasional member specials. It's a lot. It's a good time. Get more of us. It's great. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.
Now the show is over. They didn't even mean to begin, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. John didn't do any research. Marco and Casey wouldn't let him, 'cause it was accidental. Oh, it was accidental. And you can find the show notes at atp.fm. And if you're into Mastodon, you can follow them at CASEYLISS. So that's Casey Liss, MARCOARMENT, Marco Arment, SIRAC, USA Syracuse. It's accidental. They didn't mean to. Accidental. Tech podcast so long.
Because I didn't put it in yellow and bold, we forgot to talk about gift memberships.
God damn it.
Show.
God damn it. Do you want to do it now and drop it in?
Yeah,
Marco?
wedge it in.
No, we're not going to drop it in. It's going to be at the end of the show. This is our punishment.
All right.
It's the reward for the people who made it this far, and it's our punishment for not doing it at the front of the show because we're bad.
God damn it. All right. Hey, so we did the thing. or didn't do the thing, depending on how you look at it. We were supposed to talk about something way at the top of the show, and we didn't. And so we're going to talk about it way at the end of the show. And I'm going to use one final opportunity as I sit here on the 22nd of December to say that if you are a slacker or procrastinator or just generally need an idea for an excellent gift, let me tell you, an excellent gift you can get the nerd in your life is ATP membership. You can do it for a month. You can do it for a year. You go to atp.fm/gift and you can gift someone ATP membership, which is really great. You will not spoil the surprise or anything like that. We will basically, as the flow that John created tells you very explicitly, it is up to you to notify the recipient. We give you a special code, URL, whatever, and it is up to you to give that to the recipient to actually give them the gift. John, anything you would like to add about that?
Nope, it's pretty straightforward. Again, we've had a lot of success with the system. There's nothing for you to lose. What if I went to that screen and I forgot? Oh, it told me to save this code, but I forgot. Am I ever going to see that code again? No, it's on your member page. You just log in. Every gift you've ever given or received is listed there, along with redemption instructions, the URL, the code, everything. It's pretty straightforward system. It's a great gift. It's a last minute gift that you can deliver it instantly. I think there is probably a nerd in your life that might like it. And if you are, now here's the problem with this. Who are you talking to? Someone who's going to give this to me as a gift? They're not listening to the show. I'm listening to the show and I want it as a gift. Well, on the store page, if you log into atp.fm or you go to atp.fm/gift or atp.fm/store, if you are logged in, both of those places will say, hey, do you want someone to buy you a gift membership? Give them this URL, and that you just give that URL to somebody and say, click on this and buy it for me. That will pre-fill the form with your information and get it sent to you. So yeah, the people who are going to buy a gift membership probably aren't listening to the show. The people who want a gift membership probably are listening. So that is a thing you can do as well. But either way, if you just tell them, hey, I want an ATP membership, go to atp.fm/gift and get it for me. They'll figure it out. It works fine.
Excellent. And remember, you get the bootleg, or the gift recipient gets the bootleg, member specials, ad-free feed. If they hang on to the membership long enough, discounts on our time-limited merch, the whole rigmarole, all sorts of fun stuff. So atp.fm/gift. John, you have a problem, is my understanding. Tell me about this.
Yet another reason I'm not upgrading Tahoe. Still, it's like, what are we on? We're on 26.2 with 26.3 in beta. The first real strike against me in app development was the Xcode 26.1 that broke my ability to have new icons in the new old OS and old icons in the old OS, which really annoyed me, as if I didn't need more annoyance related to icons in this thing. And now the new annoyance, I got a bug report that said, hey, the new glass appearance and, Tahoe, liquid glass appearance for my app switcher palette in Switch Glass, which was essentially the main Tahoe feature, was like, hey, there's this new glass thing. I should use that as one of the options. You already had like 6 options of how you wanted to look. One of them, actually 3 of them, are glass. There's regular glass, clear glass, and tinted glass, all of which are appearances. And they're like, hey, it doesn't work right anymore. Things don't show behind it. Like if you move a window behind it, you can't see through the glass. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course you can. That's exactly how glass works. You put stuff behind it and it does a little warping effect or whatever. But sure enough, I fired it up on 26.2 and it didn't work. And so there we go. New sample project in Xcode. Made a reproduction, and like I was making the bug report, because you just make a window, you put glass appearance on it, and you put a yellow sticky note behind it. It's like, nope, can't see the sticky note through it. And I'm like, well, here was the complication. Has this never worked and I'm just forgetting? Like what? Well, I start to feel like what's going on here? Like I could swear this worked fine. Unfortunately, by that point, I no longer had any machines that were running 26.1. I just had 26.2 and then like 26.3 beta, but I didn't have 26.1 anymore. The majority of the time it took me to report this bug was figuring out how the hell to get 26.1 back on one of these Macs. I hate the install process for like installing an old version of macOS and external drive so much on modern Mac. I understand why it's there. I understand the secure boot, blah, blah, blah. But getting the full installer, which Apple does not make easy, and then getting that installed and having to complain, no, you can't install on that disk, and this disk is not signed in with an account, and it's owned by the blah, blah, blah. Oh, I hate it so much. It used to be so much easier. Speaking of things that were easier back when there was less security. Anyway, eventually I did it. I got 26.1 back on a thing, and sure enough, worked fine back then. Worked in 26.0, worked in 26.1, 26.2 totally. And this is not like a minor feature. This is on macOS. the glass appearance does not glass. and maybe it's like, okay, well, a glass is fine within a window, but if you think of something like the dock or switch glass, it's kind of like just like a floating window with a glass background. So like if you drag a window behind the dock, you see it through the dock. It's glass, right? My thing used to be the same thing, and they totally broke that in 26.2. And I believe also in 26.3 beta. Just 100% broken. Like you put a window behind it and you don't see the thing behind it. Maddening. So anyway, I'm making the bug report. And I'm like, okay, but now that I've got a machine that runs 26.1 and then one that's running 26.2, now I can take screenshots of one and the other and say, this is how it used to look. This is how it looks now. This is a regression. You broke it. And I was taking the screenshots and then I'm like dragging them into like the feedback app or whatever. And I'm like, I'm using the space bar to quick look to say, okay, was this the one before or after the breakage? And I'm looking at the screenshots and it looks right in all the screenshots.
Cool.
What?
Like, what the hell? I'm like, maybe I just took it wrong. So I go back to the machine and take another screenshot. Like, no, what? So this is one of those things where the screenshot, when you take a screenshot, everything renders correctly. But on the actual screen, it doesn't. So I took a video with my phone of the screen.
Like an animal.
I posted it to Mastodon. I'm like, look, I swear to you, this is broken. Here, I put my phone on a tripod in front of my laptop screen and hit record. And I said, it's broken. Look, it's totally broken. The worst part is that if the window appears or the glass appearance turns on or whatever, when there's a thing behind it, like, so let's say you put the yellow sticky note behind the thing and then like, put a liquid glass window appears in front of it. Then the yellow thing shows through, like the yellow sticky note shows through like all fuzzy and glass and distorted. But then if you drag the sticky note out from underneath it, the part of it that appeared behind it gets stuck there. Like it's like a pre-rendered background, like it sticks
Ridiculous.
there. Someone sent me, I think it's in the same Mastodon, said a screenshot. No, it was in a Slack channel. Like the thing that comes up that says like, do you sure you want to restart your computer? That's like a glassy, that little dialogue that comes up. That's a glassy thing too. If that comes up over a background window and then you move the background window out of the way, the little residue of that background window stays there. Like, so it's super broken across the whole OS, not just in AppKit apps, not just in my app, it works in the dock, but like system dialogues will retain a burned in copy of the windows that were behind them after you drag the windows out. This is not giving me lots of confidence in Tahoe. Again, this is 26.2 this broke in. This is not a 0.0 thing. So Apple continues to annoy me, and the quality control of this release seems not great.
I hate to say I told everyone so, but I'm not kind of repeating myself a lot here, but like when you do a giant system redesign, you basically have a year in beta. This entire cycle, 26 series OSs are all going to be like a little bit beta, probably for most or all of the entire year, just because it's a huge undertaking. This is part of why it's something that's not, to be undertaken lightly. It's a huge undertaking, and there's just a lot that changes and a lot that needs to be tweaked and fixed and redesigned and adjusted, and there's not enough time in the regular summer beta cycle that Apple enforces. There's not enough time in that to do a whole redesign with a high level of software quality. They just, and rather than change their schedule, which they're not going to do, this is what we have to deal with. It's a year of beta. Enjoy.
To be honest, I'm running Tahoe on my computer and it's fine. Like I not to say that you guys are wrong or anything like that, but in my experience, it's been fine.
Next time a dialogue comes up, one of those glassy translucent dialogues, and it comes up over a window, move the window out from behind it and watch how a piece of it stays stuck to the dialogue and tell me how fine it is.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
How does that happen in the 0.2 release? How? Like, what are they doing?
Because they were fixing bigger bugs than the other releases.
They were fixing it like it's just, it's not reassuring.